What happens when a Hollywood legend meets late-night arrogance head-on? What unfolds when a woman who spent decades on the front lines of justice comes face-to-face with a host who thinks condescension is comedy? Tonight you're about to witness one of the most volatile interviews in late-night television history. An unscripted, fiery confrontation that left producers scrambling, cameras rattling, and an entire studio stunned into silence. This is the night Jane Fonda faced off against Jimmy Kimmel, and no one saw it coming. Before we dive into the blow-by-blow of this unforgettable clash, make sure you hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to see isn't just uncomfortable TV. It's a cultural fault line caught live on camera. The night began like any other taping at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio in Hollywood. Jane Fonda, two-time Oscar winner, activist, and living icon, was scheduled as the final guest. She was there to promote her latest environmental campaign, a continuation of the work that's defined much of her public life. Backstage, producers noted her intelligence, warmth, and effortless poise. Everything pointed toward a straightforward, even inspiring interview. Jimmy Kimmel took the stage with his usual late-night bravado. His monologue was filled with celebrity jabs and political zingers, the audience laughing on cue, unaware that they were about to witness something that would ricochet across the internet for weeks. Then, he introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Jane Fonda," Kimmel said, the words coated with a subtle smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. As Jane stepped on stage, elegant, focused, timeless, the applause was thunderous. She wore a tailored blazer and a calm expression, radiating the kind of authority that only comes from decades in the spotlight and on the front lines of real battles. "Jane, great to have you here," Kimmel said as she sat. But something about his tone was already off. Too casual, too dismissive. "So you're here to save the planet. Again." How many times have we heard that speech? The comment landed like a slap. Fonda's smile barely faltered, but something behind her eyes hardened. "I'm here to talk about the most urgent crisis of our time," she said, measured but firm. "Climate change affects everyone, especially the people in this audience." Kimmel leaned back, waving dismissively. Right. But haven't you been saying the same thing for, 20 years? At some point, don't you think the rest of us get tired of being lectured by Hollywood elites? The studio grew still. This wasn't light banter anymore. Fonda's posture straightened. "Hollywood elite? Jimmy, I've been arrested for what I believe in. I've put my career, my freedom, and my reputation on the line again and again. This isn't about preaching. It's about survival." Kimmel chuckled, the sound sharp and condescending. "Arrested for a photo op. Let's be honest. You're worth millions. You fly private jets. And you want working-class families to bike to work? Come on." It hit like poison. Fonda didn't flinch. "That's not only false, it's lazy. I don't own a private jet. I offset my carbon footprint. And more importantly, I invest in real change. But this isn't about me. It's about what kind of world we're leaving behind." Kimmel rolled his eyes. "The children. Right. That old chestnut. Look, Jane, I get it. You need something to stay in the spotlight now that your acting days are over. So you picked climate change. That's sweet." The room went silent. Cold. Jane's hands, resting gently on her lap, curled into fists. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. But it cut sharper than anything before it. "Excuse me? Oh, did I hit a nerve?" Kimmel grinned, clearly enjoying himself. "Come on, Jane. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You had your moment back in the 70s and 80s. Now you're trying to hang on to relevance by hopping onto every trending cause. First it was the war, then your workout tapes, and now it's climate change. What's next? Crypto. The audience visibly squirmed. This wasn't witty. This was turning cruel. Fonda leaned forward, calm but seething. Her voice carried the weight of a lifetime spent in the trenches of activism. Let me explain something to you, Jimmy. I've been fighting for justice since before you even knew what a protest was. I spoke out against the Vietnam War when it nearly destroyed my career. I've marched for women's rights, civil rights, and now climate justice. Not because it's fashionable, but because it matters more than your ratings or your sarcasm, Kimmel scoffed. You protesters were all the same back then. Spoiled. Kids playing rebel while real Americans fought and died. You want to talk about war? Let's talk about North Vietnam. You sat on an anti-aircraft gun. That wasn't protest, Jane. That was treason. The words were a grenade. Fonda's face paled, then flushed red. A decades-old scar, reopened for a laugh. She steadied herself. That photograph was staged without my knowledge or consent, she said sharply. I've apologized publicly and privately for years. But for you to use the trauma of veterans and their families as a punchline, just to rile up your crowd, says far more about your character than mine. Kimmel laughed, but it rang hollow now. Character? That's rich. You made a whole career out of bashing America, then tried to rebrand yourself with leg warmers and Pilates. Tell me, Jane, how many American jobs have to disappear so you can feel better about your carbon footprint? Without warning, Fonda stood. Her chair scraped across the floor, the sound slicing through the silent studio. The audience froze, every camera locked onto her. I have spent my entire adult life trying to make this country live up to its ideals, she said, voice rising clear and commanding. I have never hated America. I've hated injustice carried out in its name, and I'll be damned if I let some smug late-night host, who's never risked anything more than a bad Yelp review, question my patriotism or my integrity. Sit down, Jane, Kimmel said, but the swagger was cracking. No, she replied, steady as stone. I will not sit down. I will not be silenced. And I will not let you lie to your audience. In the name of a cheap laugh, tension gripped the room. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or simply get up and leave. In Kimmel's earpiece, a producer whispered frantically, "Take a break, now." He waved it off. "No, this is gold," he muttered, though sweat was now gathering beneath the bright lights. Turning back to Fonda, he went in harder. You want to talk about lies? How about the lie that Hollywood celebrities are political experts? You're not a scientist, Jane. You're not a policymaker. You're just an actress reading lines. That's it. Fonda's laugh sliced through the tension. Bitter. Icy. An actress who memorizes lines? She repeated. Jimmy, I've testified before Congress more times than you've changed your hairstyle. I work with scientists, policy leaders, activists. I study these issues. I don't show up for applause. I show up for impact. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but dangerous. What's your expertise, Jimmy? Mocking celebrities? Reading cue cards? Making fun of people braver than you'll ever be? Kimmel snapped back, voice cracking as it rose. I connect with real Americans, Kimmel sneered. Oh, did I hit a nerve? The smirk on his face widened as he leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. You had your time. Back in the 70s, maybe the 80s. And now you're clinging to every trendy cause that gets headlines. First it was the war, then it was workout tapes, and now it's climate change. What's next? NFTs. The audience squirmed. The atmosphere had shifted, no longer playful but sharp-edged and hostile. Fonda leaned forward slowly, her voice low, steady, and laced with fury earned over decades. "Jimmy," she said, "I've been fighting for justice since before you learned to read. I protested the Vietnam War when it could have ended my career. I've marched for women's rights, civil rights, and now environmental justice. Because those causes matter. They're bigger than jokes, bigger than your ratings." "Oh, come on," Kimmel scoffed. "You protesters were all the same back then. Privileged brats playing rebel while real Americans were dying overseas. Let's not forget, you went to North Vietnam and posed on an anti-aircraft gun. That's not protest. That's treason." The blow landed hard. Fonda's face went pale, then flushed crimson. The infamous photo, her deepest scar, flung back at her on national television, not by a politician, but by a late-night host, grasping for a viral clip. "That photograph was staged by the North Vietnamese," she said, each word like a blade. "I didn't know what it was at the time. I've apologized countless times. But the fact that you'd weaponize the trauma of veterans and their families as a punchline, that says everything about you." Kimmel's laugh was hollow. "My character? That's rich. Coming from someone who built a career out of trashing America, then tried to rebrand herself as a fitness icon. Tell me, Jane, how many working people have to lose their jobs so you can sleep soundly in your solar-powered mansion?" Fonda stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. Her presence was commanding, like a general before battle. "I've spent my life trying to make this country live up to its promises. I've never hated America, Jimmy. I've hated the injustices done in its name, and I'll be damned if I let some smirking late-night host, who's never risked more than a bad monologue, question my patriotism." "Sit down, Jane," Kimmel snapped, the cocky tone beginning to crack. "This is my show." "No," she said firmly, her voice rising like a drumbeat. "I won't sit down. I won't be dismissed. And I sure as hell won't let you peddle lies and mock serious issues for a few cheap laughs." The tension in the room was suffocating. Even the studio crew was still. Kimmel's smug expression had faded into something closer to panic. "Maybe we should go to commercial," a producer whispered into his earpiece. No," Kimmel muttered, waving it off, sweat now forming at his temples. "This is good TV." He turned back toward her, trying to regain control. "You want to talk about lies and misinformation? Let's talk about how celebrities like you pretend to be policy experts. You're an actress, Jane. Not a scientist. Not a policymaker. You read lines. That's it." Fonda let out a bitter, joyless laugh. "I've testified before Congress. I've worked with environmental scientists, lawmakers, and grassroots activists. I've done the homework. Have you?" She stepped closer to the desk. "What exactly is your expertise, Jimmy? Reciting cue cards? Mocking celebrities for retweets? I connect with real Americans," he snapped, his voice rising. "Real Americans?" she repeated. "You sit in this studio every night turning people's pain into punchlines. You think that's connection? When was the last time you listened? Really? Listened? Without planning the next joke?" The crowd began murmuring. A few nodded in agreement. Kimmel's fan base was shifting in real time, uneasy as their hero unraveled under the weight of her words. "That's what comedy is," Kimmel muttered. It helps people laugh through the hard stuff. No, Jimmy, Fonda replied coldly. That's not comedy. That's cowardice. Real comedy challenges power. It doesn't protect it. You don't take risks. You take the easy shots, the safe ones, the ones that won't cost you, add revenue. You don't know anything about my career, he shot back. But I do, she said. I know you've had a chance, this platform, to say something that mattered, and you've wasted it. You brought me here to talk about climate action, and instead you turned it into a smear campaign. This is a talk show, Jane, not a TED Talk, he snapped. Lighten up. Just a talk show? Fonda's voice rose for the first time, fire now flickering at the edges. A talk show that reaches millions, that shapes how people think. You don't get to hide behind that excuse. You have power, Jimmy, whether you admit it or not. I have a responsibility to entertain, not to platform washed-up celebrities with an agenda. The insult landed. Fonda stiffened, but then straightened, her voice deadly calm. Washed up? She echoed. Jimmy, I've won 2 Oscars, 7 Golden Globes, and revolutionized the fitness industry. I've worked with the greatest directors in the world, and I'm starring in a hit series right now. What have you done, besides hiding behind this desk and sneering at people who try to make a difference? Kimmel's face reddened. Anger, shame, or both. I've built a show that brings joy to millions, he barked. Built on what? Fonda pressed. Mockery, cynicism, making people believe that hope is naive, that caring is cringe. That's not joy, Jimmy. That's poison. He stood up abruptly, his voice brittle with frustration. I don't have to sit here and be lectured. This is my studio. If you don't like it, you can leave. Gladly, Fonda said without missing a beat. But first, let me speak to your audience, the ones you claim to speak for. She turned to the cameras, Kimmel's objections fading into the background. Her voice was steady, controlled, commanding. To everyone watching, don't let anyone tell you that caring makes you weak. Don't let cynics convince you that trying to make the world better is something to mock. The problems we face are real, but so are the solutions. Don't let yourself be distracted by those who profit from your apathy. Cut to commercial, Kimmel barked at the control booth, his voice cracking. But Fonda wasn't finished. And Jimmy, she said, turning back to him. Someday you're going to realize you had a chance to be part of something that mattered, and you chose to be small instead. The words hit like a hammer. Kimmel froze behind his desk, his expression flickering between fury and something dangerously close to shame. The audience didn't clap. They didn't boo. They just sat, silent, stunned, absorbing a moment of raw, unscripted truth that had pierced the bubble of late-night entertainment. I feel sorry for you, Fonda added, and those 5 words stung more than anything else she could have said. Kimmel croaked into the microphone. Security! Get security up here! Fonda gave a cold, mirthless laugh. For what, Jimmy? For telling the truth? For refusing to play along with the farce? And she stood there, unmoving, unafraid. As the camera cut to black, Kimmel tried to salvage his authority, but the words came out brittle. What's your little game here? Refusing to be intimidated by my show. You're disrupting everything. Fonda didn't flinch. Disrupting? Jimmy, you ambushed me with personal attacks, peddled falsehoods about my activism, mocked decades of my work, and questioned my patriotism on national television. And I'm the one being unprofessional. 2 security guards stepped into the wings of the stage, clearly tense. They weren't just responding to a difficult guest. They were weighing the optics of forcibly removing Jane Fonda. Even they knew this was no ordinary confrontation. "Ma'am," one said gently, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Fonda turned to them with a calm, almost maternal gaze. "I understand you're doing your job, but let me ask you something. Do you have children? Grandchildren? Do you care about the world you're leaving behind?" The guards exchanged uncertain looks. They hadn't signed up for a moral reckoning. "Because that's what this is about," Fonda said, voice resonating across the studio. "Not me, not him. It's about whether we're willing to talk honestly about the crises facing this planet, or let people like Jimmy here turn everything into a joke until there's nothing left to laugh about." "Just get her out," Kimmel barked, but even his tone betrayed how unmoored he'd become. The guards hesitated. "I'll leave," Fonda said, lifting her purse with poise. "But not because you threw me out. I'm leaving because I have better things to do than waste my time with someone who gave up on making a difference." She rose, regal as ever, her every movement steeped in dignity. But just as she turned to exit, Kimmel hurled one last jab. "No, Jane. Maybe if you spent less time lecturing and more time entertaining, your career wouldn't be circling the drain." Fonda stopped, turned, the room chilled. "My career?" Her voice was ice. "Jimmy, I've worked in this industry for over 60 years. I've reinvented myself more times than you've had original punchlines. While you've been recycling the same tired jokes, I've taken risks, pushed boundaries, and used my voice to make actual change." She stepped toward him. Kimmel flinched. "You want to know what's circling the drain? This show, this whole format, this cynical charade that confuses cruelty for cleverness and apathy for insight." Kimmel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You had Jane Fonda on your show tonight, a woman who's lived through Vietnam, Watergate, the Civil Rights Movement, who has stories that could teach, heal, and inspire. And what did you do with that opportunity? You squandered it, chose snark over substance. You went for ratings instead of relevance. The audience was riveted. A few started clapping. This," Fonda gestured broadly, "this is what's wrong with media. Instead of elevating the conversation, you drag everything down. You say it's just entertainment. But entertainment shapes culture, and you've chosen to weaponize yours to belittle, distract, and divide." "Get her out!" Kimmel shouted, his face flushed with fury and shame. The security guards moved, but Fonda raised her hand again. "Don't worry, gentlemen. I'm done here. But before I go, I want everyone watching, here and at home, to remember this moment." She turned to the camera. Her voice dropped to a firm, unwavering cadence. "Remember what it looks like when someone chooses to be small instead of great. Remember what it sounds like when mediocrity tries to shout down excellence. And remember that standing up for something will always matter more than standing behind a desk, making jokes at other people's expense." She paused at the edge of the stage. "Jimmy, I sincerely hope that one day you find something you care about more than your ratings, because until then you'll just keep shrinking, until you disappear." And with that, Jane Fonda walked off the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live for the last time. The studio fell into stunned silence. Kimmel stood frozen, his carefully cultivated persona shattered in front of millions. The audience didn't move. They didn't speak. It wasn't just a talk show meltdown. It was a moment of raw truth, a legend refusing to be silenced. And as the cameras kept rolling, one thing became unmistakably clear. Some people don't play the game. Some people break it.